Hi there and welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm fixing an old favourite, a nice hearty meat pie. Now my Australian friends will be very familiar with meat pies. For my American friends, they might think of something along the lines of a pot pie. Now I have to admit, when I came to America and tried a pot pie for the first time, I was a little disappointed because a pot pie to me seemed like soup inside a pastry shell. It wasn't something that you could pick up and just eat with your hands like you can do with a traditional Australian meat pie. The meat pies that I'm used to are very hearty. You can hold them in your hands to eat them. While you might get a little bit messy, depending on the pie and the brand, generally speaking, they could be a handheld food. Say like a taco or something here, taco or burrito, that you can eat with your hands. Sometimes they'll get a bit messy, but for the most part, you can eat them and just enjoy them. So when I came to the States, and occasionally would get homesick for the food I was used to, I would sometimes bake a meat pie. Because I was serving the family, I did a family-sized meat pie rather than a handheld pie. So that's what I'll be fixing today. So let's get started. I'm going to start by cutting up an onion. I'm just going to use a small onion. I'll get this peeled first and then I'll cut it up. So I'm going to slice up a small onion. This will only take a minute or two. It can be cut as finely or as coarsely as you like. It just adds a lot of flavour to the meat for the meat pie. There we go. So with just a little oil in the hot pan, I'll get the onion browned up a little just to start, to release all the nice flavours and juices from the onion. I have my onion in my pan. I'm just, it's becoming clear now. You see the onion as it fries up in the pan here. Changing colour just a little. Give that just a couple more minutes. So these onions are nicely sautéed now. They haven't started to turn brown. They should do that here in the next minute or so. We don't actually want to fry them up. We just want them just starting to change colour. And that's looking pretty nice right now. So I'm going to go ahead and add my meat. Now I'm going to add my ground beef to the pan. I have 2 pounds of ground beef here. I probably won't need that much. I normally work with a 1 pound package, but since I had 2 pounds, that's what I'll work with. And if I don't need all of the meat, then I will have some for something else later on. So we'll go ahead and get this broken up and browned up. Don't need the heat to be too high, just a medium heat for this. My spoon is not going to work very well for this. I need something a little more solid than that. So I'll get something else out of the drawer here. That's a nice solid wooden spoon here. It's got a little bit more oomph to it. I'd like to use a metal spoon on my pans here because I don't want to ruin the surface of the pan. It has a nice non-stick coating to it that I don't want to scratch up too badly, so I won't use a metal spoon on the pan. I feel just a touch frozen right in the core here, so we'll get that broken up as it starts to cook on the edges. Now that my meat is just about finished browning up, it's time to start seasoning it. Now I just want to mention here that if you have a fairly high fat content of ground beef, then this would be the time that you would drain any excess fat out. Now this ground beef that I'm using today is very lean, so the only thing I have in the pan is basically just juices from the meat, so I don't want to lose that, so I won't be draining this. Now just a little tip that this can be as simple or as complicated as you want it to be. And if you would like, you could even at this point use a packaged gravy mix and make it up according to the directions. So for 2 cups of gravy, you follow the instructions on the package and add that to the pan and cook it up. So you have a nice thick gravy for this. Because you can make your own gravy, season it up as you like, which is what I will be doing here today. So if you'd like to just follow along with me, we'll see how we go with just throwing things in the pan. So I'm going to start by adding some seasonings and flavorings to this meat. I'm going to add lots of garlic powder. If you have fresh garlic, you could have done garlic in with the onions at the beginning as well, but I don't happen to have any, so I'm using garlic powder. I'll add a little onion powder just because I can. Some pepper, black pepper. I'll mix that all around to start. And then I'm going to use for liquid to make the gravy for this, a little bit of bone broth. Now you could use beef broth, or you could just use water and then add extra seasonings and flavorings so that you get something that is a little heartier and tastier than just using plain water. So I'll go ahead and get some bone broth in there. Once again, I just eyeball the quantity here because I can always add more later as well. So we'll start with probably that would be a little bit more than, that'll be about 3/4 of a cup. Okay, I'm down to the 300 ml mark on there, so that was around 200 mils. So let this simmer here a little bit. I'm also going to add some soy sauce. I like the flavour that soy sauce adds to meats and gravies. So I'll put a generous slop of soy sauce in there as well. And we'll let this simmer for a few minutes and then give it a taste test and see what else it might need just to add to the flavour. With the meat pie, as I said, you can add any flavourings you like. It's good with using tomato juice or even whole tomatoes in here to add a different flavor. You could make a curry pie, you could use turmeric. Turmeric is very popular today. So you can use any kinds of flavorings at all. Beef stock cubes work well. So we'll let this simmer for a couple of minutes and do a taste test on the juices. So now I'm going to do a little taste test, just to see how our flavors are blending. It's actually not bad. Needs something, but I'm not sure what yet. What I'll do, I think, is add a little bit of Italian seasoning. I like the herb blend that comes in the Italian seasoning. Has oregano, marjoram, thyme, rosemary and sage. So that's a nice little combination of spices and herbs. So I'll give that a bit of a shake and give that another minute of simmering, and then I will give it another taste test. As it says, the flavors will blend together. This will be going in the oven once it gets into the pie shell, so that'll have more time for the flavors to blend in as well. But there's lots of different things you could do with the meat pie. I've seen them done where you put the meat in the pie, then you might top it with a layer of cheese before you put the top crust on. Another thing you can do is not put the top crust on at all, but top it with mashed potato to make a shepherd's pie out of it. So let's just see, now that's simmered a little, how this is now with those herbs in there. That's better. I think that'll be nice once that blends in a bit longer. So what I'm going to do now is take some of my beef broth, my bone broth, put just a couple of ounces into a cup with some cornstarch. I'll put about a tablespoon or two. That's probably a tablespoon, maybe a second one. Mix that up. And then I'll add that to the pan. That will thicken the gravy up. Add that a little at a time so we don't lose too much heat in the pan. Plus then we can see how much it's thickening up so that we don't add too much cornstarch to the mix. But don't forget, we want this to be a nice hearty pie that if you're doing an individual pie that you would even be able to pick up and eat with your hands. So we do want the gravy to be probably thicker than, say, your beef stew gravy would be. I might put just a little more in. Oh, what the heck, put the whole lot in. Oops. So let's stir this up. Let it come to a boil and simmer it for a couple of minutes so that that cornstarch will cook. Now, as you can see, we have a very thick mix here. if you were using a package of brown gravy to thicken this up, you would want to make sure that the other spices and flavourings you put in were not too salty, because the brown gravy is salty, which would have a nice colour if you used a packaged brown gravy, because it would be nice and brown. And so that looks good. Let's have a taste. It's nice and thick and has a nice flavour. So I'm going to turn this stove top off and take this off the heat while I prepare the pastry crust. Well, I have my pastry mat out. I'm using ready-made pastry crust today. So I'll start by flouring my pastry mat just a little and carefully rolling out the pastry so that it's flat. And I'll just lightly flour that as well. On both sides. That will help prevent the pastry from sticking to the bottom of the pan. I'm using a 9-inch pan for my family size meat pie today. So I'll just press that pastry down into the pan at the bottom and gently fold it over the edge of the pan. Then I'm going to spoon my meat into the pie. Now this is still fairly hot. It should be cooled down a little more than this, but I'm anxious, so I'm getting it done. I'm going to make it a nice full pie. I shouldn't need all of this meat. On the other hand, if I want to make sure it's well packed, I can probably get most of it in here. The rest of it would be really nice on toast for breakfast or for lunch. Make a nice meat gravy on toast or biscuits. There we go. That looks good. So now I'm going to flour the top crust as well, the same as I did for the bottom crust. Still a little flour on my pastry mat, so I'll work with what I have. Open this up, sprinkle it lightly, and pat it out there. This makes the pastry easier to handle as well. So I'll bring my pie back here and carefully place the top crust on the bottom crust. Now what I will also do is use a little milk to seal the edges together, which you can do after you've put top crust on so you can see where you're going, or you can do it before you put that on. So I'm just using a basting brush here to pat that milk around. You could also use water, but since I'm going to be using milk to colour the top crust up, I have that milk handy. So now I'm just going to gently press the crust together. So seal those up, then decorate that. There's a couple of ways of doing that. You can just push them together with the fingers and make a nice little edge all the way around. You can use a fork, like I did with the peach pie that I made a couple of weeks ago. So however you want to make those crusts stick together and form one piece of pastry around the edge. You can be as decorative as you like there. Then I'll cut the extra bits of pastry from the edge. And the handle of the pan is a little bit wider than the rest of the edge, so trim that up a bit more. Now I'm going to put the milk on the top before I put the holes in, because once I put the holes I could have gravy popping up a little bit from the holes, and it'll get smeared all over the top if I do the milk on top first. So this will just help add a nice colour. You could use egg white to do this, or you could do nothing at all, just leave it plain. So there we go. I'll put a couple of holes in here to vent the steam from the pie while it's cooking. I have some pie shields that I'll put around the edge. You can put regular aluminum foil around the edges so that the edges don't crisp up and burn ahead of the rest of the pie cooking. Or you can use some handy gadgets that you might have in your kitchen. These work quite well for me most of the time. Sometimes they give me a little bit of grief and don't want to get on there and stay on, and want to pop up, but they do work a little easier for me than using trying to bend aluminum foil. So I said I'll have to fight with them just a little bit to get them on and to stay put, but there we go. They don't have to be really tight, they're just creating a protective cover to those edges. So now I'll put the pie on a pan before I put it in the oven. That helps to minimize any overflow from the pie while it's cooking. It also makes it easier to put the pie in and out of the oven. So I will put this in the oven at 425 until it's nicely brown. That will probably take about 30 minutes. So I'll come back in about 30 minutes and check on that, and if it's ready, we'll have supper. I have some potato wedges in the oven as well that'll make a nice side to go with the pie. So we'll be having potato wedges, meat pie, and a nice fresh salad for supper tonight. So I'll be back in just a little while. So it's been right at about 30 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and take the pie out and take a look, see if it's browned up nicely. That looks very nice. Doesn't that look good? I think we're done, so I'll go ahead and turn the oven off. It's not going to need any more time. Let that cool down just a little so that it'll be ready to serve. So thank you for joining me today while I made a family-sized meat pie for supper tonight. I hope you'll join me again next time. Have a great day. Bye.